Good morning. Welcome back to another stream. So, in this stream, I'm going to be discussing my personal writing journey that ultimately led to deciding to self publish my books. It's been a very up and down journey, and I've learned a lot along the way. I've made mistakes along the way. So, if by the end of this workshop you happen to feel like, oh, yeah, I think I'm in a similar mindset and I'd love to self publish my book, I do actually have a workshop that I run on how to self publish a book, in particular from Australia, because there are probably some courses and things out there, but I'll be sharing my personal experiences, and that's linked in the description. But any resources I share as well along the way, I'll be linking. But let's dive in. So, my writing journey began when I was in primary school because I absolutely loved reading. So, naturally, writing became something I also enjoyed. I read literally a book a day. I read, Goosebumps, and I read all genres. I read, like sort of horror, thrillers, just family, mystery, love stories, and I just loved getting lost in that world that the writer created. And I guess experiencing that made me inspired to dabble in writing myself, and I guess writing the stories that I hadn't read using my imagination. So I literally have been writing since primary school, so poetry, short stories. But one of my dreams was to write a novel, which it was just always in the back of my mind and something that I thought, oh, I'll revisit it eventually. I suppose, though, something that I grew up hearing and learning about is that writing isn't really a profitable career. Uh, you always hear that phrase, the starving artist. So I came to this decision, I guess, when it came to high school, when I was trying to decide what career path I was going to take, that although I love writing, I probably can't make a living from writing, so I'm going to instead, study education, which led me to teaching. But also, there was another aspect of writing that led me to taking a very different path, even with my studies in university. Although writing was always my passion, I grew up being quite, I guess, fearful to share my writing with others because it was just such a big part of me. It felt like it was a piece of my soul, and I just never liked the idea of being marked for my writing when I'm like, you're basically marking my soul, a part of my soul. So that led me to actually deciding not to study writing in university, although in school, my English teachers always told me, you're a great writer, you should write a book, and so on and so forth. And I did well in those subjects. I just didn't really like that idea of being graded on my writing. So I did a completely different degree in university. I did education and science, where my majors were education, pure mathematics, and chemistry. So, chemistry, I don't even know anything about now. Maths, I actually do still love and is a part of my life. And would you believe I use it in my writing? I use maths and thinking in a very mathematical way to approach my writing. So, yeah, so I guess I kind of started off in that mindset of, well, writing's not really going to be a career for me. It's just something that I love. I hope to do it eventually, one day write that novel that I've always dreamed to write. But let me just focus on just, making money in my career, and then I'll revisit writing. So what happened though was I was a teacher for a year. Didn't last very long. It was a very challenging profession, working with high school kids. I found myself working in the community sector as a youth worker, and then after that position, there was some change in government and we lost our funding, so my position was becoming redundant. That was in that stage of my life where I started to become interested in entrepreneurship. I guess, especially having worked in the sector of community where we are always tight with money and always trying to budget and trying to make the most of what we have. I started to think, I wonder if I can explore entrepreneurship where there's no ceiling to what you can make. And I started learning about business and finance. And so then my, I guess, thoughts changed when it came to writing. I thought to myself, I'm not going to try and make a career and try to write some, on the side. I want to start a business and make it successful so that I can then do writing, more seriously. So that became my new goal, is to focus on, entrepreneurship, focus on, creating a business. And then my hope was I can have a business that just runs, and then I'll be able to do what I love, which is writing. Because all those years writing, it's just something that I never gave up. I'll work on it, and then I'll shift and do what life needs me to do. And then I'll return to writing and so on and so forth. So what I thought though was I remembered my English literature teacher in high school telling me, after reading a lot of my poetry that I submitted for different assignments, you need to put together a book of poetry. And in that moment of my role as a youth worker is about to end really soon, I'm starting to think about entrepreneurship and what it could do for me in my future. I was reminded of my high school teacher, and I thought to myself, so, how hard is it for me to put together my book, my poetry? Because writing a novel, that's a whole other thing. I needed to really knuckle down and work on that. And I hadn't worked on a novel yet at that point, but poetry, I had tons of poetry that I'd written, since high school all the way through to my uni years. So I thought to myself, could I actually bring my poetry together in a book? Like, how hard is it? Like, what is involved? So that's actually how I stumbled, a little bit by chance, on the world of self-publishing. So this is a long time ago. This is like back in maybe 2008 or 2009. So I actually decided, after doing some research on how can you publish a book, or in particular, I thought, there's an ebook. Ebooks were not as popular as they are now, but they were starting to become a bit more popular back then, because I think the Kindle had just come out. So I thought to myself, what's involved, did some research, and I tried to think, how can I make it really easy for myself to achieve this, rather than be like, okay, let's work on that novel, which is a massive project. I've never written a novel before, don't even know how to start, let alone that publishing process of it. I thought, instead, let me just collect what I already have, and all I need to learn is how to put that out into the world. But because this is my first attempt into the world of self-publishing, I made a lot of mistakes. which is part of what I now share in my How to Self-Publish a Book workshop, is I share what I've learned because of my mistakes so that you don't make those same mistakes. So for example, I was thinking about the cover for my book of poetry, and I had a friend, I was lucky enough to have a friend who was really great at graphic design, so he designed it for me. So the name of my book was Unveiling, and so I thought I want to make I really like the idea of a cover that's very symbolic of that word, because it represented me, I guess, unveiling my writing for the first time to the world. I mean, I had shared some of my work with just very close friends, but this was the first time that I decided I'm going to share it in a much more public way, which is a very vulnerable, position that I was putting myself in. So I thought Unveiling is like the perfect title. And so I want to cover that really symbolizes that. So my friend, ended up making this cover. So the cover, it looks like a Muslim woman where her eyes, it's only showing her eyes. So it looks like a Muslim woman wearing the niqab, and you can only see her eyes, and she's looking up. So the problem with that cover is people were expecting this story that's, I guess, a little bit like Not Without My Daughter, I think, because, that, unfortunately, that's, not representative of, Muslim women necessarily who wear the niqab. But because I actually got people buying the book and being like, this is not what we expected, because my poetry is quite melancholy and just, very full of angst. And so it was so not representing what my work was itself. The other mistake I made was I didn't really do marketing. I didn't really think much about marketing. I didn't realize when it comes to a book, the marketing starts before you even release it. I just released it, told my friends it's out, and just kind of hoped and prayed. So that technically was my first, I guess, foray into self-publishing. And I mean, I did sell my book, but I mean, certainly wasn't a bestseller. I certainly wasn't able to retire off it. And then I just sort of forgot about it. And I just thought, okay, I think this kind of proves publishing is just definitely not a way you can really make money. And I'll just go back to, focusing on, business and trying to learn more about that. So what happened was in around, this is quite a few years later, so it was probably around 2015, I got really into, podcasts, or I was already listening to a lot of podcasts on lots of different topics. But again, that nagging, because writing is just something I've always innately loved, that nagging to write started to, poke me. And I thought, maybe I'll look up podcasts about writing. And this is where I discovered this amazing podcast. Unfortunately, he hasn't continued it because I think he just he exhausted the content, and he was interested in just sort of writing, doing a show about other topics. But the name of the podcast is the Rocking Self-Publishing Podcast. Just the host was just such a great host in terms of just how he presented himself, how he, interviewed the guests, and it was just honestly one of my favorite podcasts. So I consumed this podcast like no tomorrow. I literally, when I discovered, the more recent episodes, I was like, nah, I want to listen to this from the very beginning. So I literally went back from the first episode, listened to every single episode, maybe re-listened to some of my favorites. And I learned so much about the world of self-publishing. So this podcast essentially is a podcast that focuses on self-published authors, and it interviews them, and they are at many different stages. So there were some self-published authors who were still working a full-time job and they were writing on the side, and they were starting to see traction with their book and starting to make money, like a decent amount of money. And then there were self-publishers who were very established. They basically were able to quit their 9 to 5 and do self-publishing for a living. There were self-publishers who called themselves hybrid authors, meaning they actually had some works that were self-published and then some works that were traditionally published, so they could actually comment on their experiences with both worlds. So honestly, I learned so much, but the key thing that happened after listening to this podcast was, for the first time, I realized, oh, self-publishing is actually a viable way to make a living. There are many examples in this podcast of that, but you have to treat it like a business, which is something I've actually been learning about for the past many years and doing tons of courses and testing out different ideas. So I started to take writing more seriously. I started to, decide, okay, what can I do to write more consistently? What can I do to almost treat this like a business? Because I want to ultimately be able to do this as a business and not have to do a 9 to 5 anymore. So, I look for writing groups. I join a writing group to write more consistently. And that actually led to me writing my first novel in 2017, The Draft, which I still have to revisit. But I joined a competition, or like a challenge, a 30-day challenge called the National Novel Writing Month, which happens every November. So those of you who are maybe, is it November yet? Are we in November? If we are, this, honestly, I've lost track of the dates and times currently. But this is a great way, if you don't mind deadlines, to challenge yourself to write a 50,000 word novel in 30 days. I actually managed to achieve it, which is like super exciting. But it was all with that intention of, I'm going to write seriously now, and I'm going to treat this like a business. I'm going to have a schedule. I'm going to track my writing. I'm going to read books about writing and how to write more efficiently. And I applied all of that, which allowed me ultimately to achieve that, first draft of my first novel in 2017. So what happened from there, though, was the place that I first discovered an amazing writing group was this organization called Centre for Stories. And being, I guess, more involved with the Centre for Stories, I came to know about, opportunities. Like, for example, there was a writing mentorship program that I ended up applying for and getting in, and that helped me grow immensely as a writer. But one of the things that I applied for and managed to get was a writing fellowship through the Centre for Stories. And that's where I got a sum of money and plus writing space at the centre for 10 weeks. And basically I could come, anytime during business hours to work on my writing. And then I was given, that sum of money to sort of help with petrol and that sort of thing. So the funny thing was doing that experience of writing for 10 weeks every single day. So I really committed in this fellowship. I literally went to that center to write before my day job, after my day job. Any spare moment I had in that week, I went to the center and I wrote. I tracked how much I wrote. I tracked my rate, my words per hour rate. I tried to improve it. Like, I just went just full on, gung-ho with making the most of that fellowship. And the thing that I didn't expect, I guess, by the end of the 10 weeks was writing burnout. I was like, oh my God, I'm actually so exhausted from that experience that I kind of decide I need to kind of take a break from writing for a bit, because that was actually just a lot. And I need to just do other things. And so I didn't write, I think, for at least a couple of months. I just did nothing to do with writing. I just left it. I just wanted to do other stuff and chill and so forth. And reflecting on that experience, as well as that vision I had of doing writing as a business, and being a self-published author, and like basically to sum up, looking at the thought of doing writing full time as a business, and that experience of actually writing almost full time in those 10 weeks, I realized that I think I want to treat writing more as a passion on the side, because I guess that experience of writing every single day for 10 weeks, it made me feel like it's become a job, and I didn't want to lose that love of it because of that pressure of I need to churn out, X number of words a day. So this is my personal journey, and this is certainly not the experience of others who may have gotten the opportunity to be able to write every single day. So for example, I have good friends, some, a number of them actually are traditionally published. One in particular, she actually just does writing for her living, but she also does things relating to writing, for example, writing workshops, that kind of thing. So I know from them that writing is a passion for them, such that it's something that they actually do every single day, alongside obviously other hobbies. But yeah, I sort of came to this funny realization that actually maybe writing is not the career I want, but I prefer it as a hobby that I just delve in and enjoy, alongside, hustling in like a business. So I sort of changed my, I guess, vision and thus mindset when it came to what I pursued in terms of my goals. So I instead started to focus more on business, and going back to, I guess, that original plan of I'm going to focus on business, I'm going to, really, really work hard, try to make it successful. And then in my breaks, I'm going to just enjoy writing. At the same time, though, what I took away from having learnt business is that, writing a novel, it's a huge effort. It's not just that draft, and there's going to be the millions of edits, and then there's going to be, putting the project together, in terms of, the cover design, the book design, and so on and so forth. And these are things, by the way, that I discuss in that workshop that's in my description. So having learnt about business, I guess the difference between my first attempt at self-publishing, which was that book of poetry, where I just did it and it was a complete fail, as in I didn't do anything in mind of, how can I market this properly? So having learned from that experience, I suppose like where I'm at now with writing and with business is, when I publish my work, because of the effort that's gone into that work, all that love and that time, and not just my efforts, but the efforts of other people that I bring in to make it the best version it can be, I want to give it its best chance by marketing it well. So I want to use what I've learned from business to, really put it out there so that as many readers as possible will actually discover it and get to enjoy it and hopefully resonate with it versus, I don't care too much about making about money from writing. So I'm just going to write, just going to put it out there without really making much effort when it comes to marketing. So I guess like that's where I'm at personally with my writing journey is I acknowledge it's not something I want to do anymore as a 9 to 5 because I don't want it to feel like a job. I like keeping it as just this beautiful part of me that enriches my soul. But at the same time, when I finish a piece of work and I want to share it with the world, I owe it to give it its best chance by applying everything I've learned about marketing and business to, get it out there and have as many, people as possible know about it. And hopefully that will mean that more people will get to, maybe experience and resonate with what I have to share. But yeah, that's a little bit about, I guess, my writing journey and how I stumbled across self-publishing. So what I will say though is, especially in my, I guess, interactions with Centre for Stories, who I ended up becoming a board member at some stage with them because I just, they're an amazing organisation. I'll link to them as well in my description. So I did learn a lot more about traditional publishing, and actually after that fellowship, one of my, I guess, goals in that fellowship was to get some pieces traditionally published. That's poetry and short stories. So I specifically wrote some work with the intent that I want to try get this published in the more traditional channels. And of course, that world involves a lot of rejection. So it was just a list of, I sent it here, got rejection, sent here, got rejection. And ultimately, that experience made me decide I just don't think traditional publishing is the world for me. Because currently I wasn't able to find a place where my writing fits. And even my, I guess you could say it is technically my second book if I count Unveiling as my first. So technically my second book that I self-published is called Love, Faith and Numbers. So initially I self-published just as an ebook because it's a very short book. It's a collection of short stories that are interconnected, and it's about a character named Zakia who is going through the ups and downs of love, and she uses her faith but also a curious obsession with numbers to deal with those ups and downs. So after I self-published it as an ebook, I started to get friends saying, oh, could you make it a print? Because, they love print books. And so that was one of the things that I realized as a self-published author is, I already know this book would not be traditionally published. It's too short. It's, it's just too short. It's like a short story, but it's not really like fitting a particular genre. Like it's not really like an anthology because it reads as one story. So Self-publishing, however, allowed me to break all the rules, and I ended up publishing it as a second version in print. And I held a launch where I shared the whole process with people, actually at the Centre for Stories, because I actually wrote a number of the stories during that fellowship. I think most of the stories, in fact, in that writing fellowship. So that was what I realized, having experienced trying to get my work traditionally published, having experienced self-publishing, but just throwing it up there without much sort of thought, and then with everything that I learned with business and also about self-publishing, in particular from this Rocking Self-Publishing workshop. So all of that came together into me releasing my first print book. And so far, I've just gotten really beautiful feedback from people, which just reminds me why I love to write, is ultimately to share a piece of my soul with others. And if it resonates with them, then it's what ultimately, I guess, makes me feel fulfilled. But ultimately, yeah, that's pretty much my entire journey when it comes to writing and what led me to deciding. I think self-publishing is the route for me, but I don't have plans to do it full time. Uh, while at the same time, I do want to do it well so that my work can get its best chance and be found by others, and hopefully will resonate with others. But yeah, thank you so much for those of you who've joined me. And as mentioned, the links to the resources I mentioned will be in the description. Until next time.